There comes a point in the middle of life, often around the age of 40, when the internal landscape begins to shift dramatically. It is a subtle change at first. Not a sudden crisis, but a slow, gradual realization that the map we were given, the one we followed so diligently, has run out of territory. We arrive at the coordinates the world promised. We have built the structure, accumulated the achievements, and fulfilled the early obligations. And when we look around, instead of the resounding sense of satisfaction we anticipated, there is sometimes a profound quietness, an echo. For decades, the priority was forward motion. The focus was on acquisition, on stability, on meeting the expectations set by parents, mentors, and the wider culture. We pursued the education, secured the employment, climbed the ladders, bought the things, and raised the children. We did all the things that were labeled right. We operated under the firm, unspoken contract that if we simply performed the required steps, happiness would be the inevitable conclusion. This energy, this focus on external validation, kept us energized for years. The sheer momentum of the busy life masked a deeper truth. But once the critical mass of achievement is reached, the need for maintenance replaces the excitement of the climb. And that is when the energy begins to deplete. This is not the simple physical tiredness that a good night's sleep can fix. This is emotional exhaustion. It's the profound fatigue that comes from living a life that perfectly fits the expectations of others, but no longer seems to fit the person we have silently become. Many people carry this weight in complete silence. There is a deep, frustrating conflict that develops. On one hand, you look at your life and see security, connection, perhaps influence. Objectively, there is little to complain about. And yet, there is an emptiness that persists, a quiet, gnawing sense of disappointment that you feel ashamed to acknowledge. How can you be dissatisfied when you have so much? This question is a prison cell. This feeling of being lost, despite being fully established, is a hallmark of this stage of life. It's the feeling of driving successfully to a destination, only to realize you were in the wrong car. The success is real, but the meaning is missing. We confuse the routine of responsibility with the purpose of existence. We continue performing the required tasks, the meetings, the errands, the bills, because that is what responsible adults do. But the spark that once ignited the effort, the initial excitement that fueled the chase, has gone out. What replaces it is not depression, necessarily, but a kind of functional numbness. We keep moving, but the internal volume has been turned way down. The world lacks color. We maintain composure, we handle problems, we show up, but inside, we are experiencing a slow psychological withdrawal. This is the point where the old identity starts to fray. The person who worked so hard to achieve stability is starting to ask, stability for what? When we were younger, our identity was often defined by what we were going to do. We were the ambitious one, the student, the young professional, the new parent. Now, those roles are established. They are no longer challenges to be conquered, but realities to be maintained. And maintaining reality is often far less inspiring than pursuing possibility. The psychological shift here is critical. In our 20s and 30s, the default setting is often expansion. We seek novelty, growth, and external definition. After 40, the inner mechanism changes. We begin to seek consolidation. We move from asking, "What can I gain?" to quietly asking, "What must I keep?" And more importantly, what must I finally let go of? The silent frustrations that build up in midlife are usually centered on things that feel permanent, that seem unchangeable, a career path chosen out of necessity that now feels like a cage, a routine built for efficiency that has now choked out spontaneity. Relationships that settled into comfortable coexistence years ago, but now lack the necessary friction or depth to feel truly alive. we realize that many of the decisions we made early on were based on outdated or incomplete information. We made choices based on our 20-year-old self's understanding of a 40-year-old's happiness, and that 20-year-old was often wrong. But we carry the weight of those past commitments. We see the consequences of our choices everywhere. In the mortgage statement, in the job title, in the faces of those who rely on us. It feels irresponsible, even selfish, to suddenly declare that we need to change the rules of the game now. So we continue to play, but the heart is no longer fully invested. This is where the feeling of being an imposter begins to surface, even in highly accomplished people. You feel like you are acting the role of the successful adult, but the real you, the one who is quiet and reflective, is standing in the wings, watching the performance with a detached sadness. The energy drain is profound because we are constantly spending mental energy defending the status quo, pretending the system is working, and suppressing the deep-seated desire for something more authentic. It is important to understand that this feeling is not a failure of character. It is a natural response to completing a life phase. The goals we set for ourselves were not inherently bad. They were simply incomplete. They provided structure, but they neglected the soul. When the structure is solid, the soul demands attention. It begins to ask questions that cannot be answered with a raise, a new car, or a short vacation. It asks about meaning. It asks about connection. It asks about legacy, not in the sense of fame or money, but in the sense of contribution, of having lived a life that mattered to us, not just to the ledger. This transition requires a painful honesty. We have to look past the surface achievements and confront the psychological reality of our current state. It means admitting that the life we built, while functional, might not be fully reflective of who we are right now. The journey toward resolving this midlife exhaustion begins not with grand plans for radical change, but with a simple, quiet withdrawal from external noise. We must carve out space to differentiate between what society requires of us and what our core self truly needs. The difference between these two things is the distance that causes the feeling of emptiness. The goal now is to close that gap. This does not mean abandoning all responsibilities. It means redefining their importance and reallocating our finite energy reserves. If we continue to live primarily in the realm of obligation, we guarantee a life of ongoing weariness. We must now become deliberate sculptors of our remaining time and energy, deciding what stays and what is allowed to crumble. This is often the first major psychological hurdle. Recognizing that the exhaustion is not due to a lack of effort, but due to a misdirection of effort. We have been trying to fill an internal void with external activity, and that is a task that will always fail. The pressure to perform is often internalized to such a degree that we cannot distinguish our own voice from the chorus of external demands. We are constantly monitoring how we appear to others: the competent employee, the perfect parent, the reliable friend. This constant self-monitoring is incredibly draining. It steals the present moment and replaces it with calculated presentation. To recover from this, we must allow ourselves the imperfection we so readily forgive in others. We have to loosen the grip of the need to be perceived as having it all together. The maturity of midlife offers the permission to finally become slightly less interested in judgment and slightly more interested in reality. Reality in this case means acknowledging the disappointment without letting it lead to bitterness. It means observing the silent frustration without transforming it into reckless destruction. It requires a calm, steady assessment of what worked and what definitively did not work in the first half of the journey. One of the most insidious conflicts of this age is the struggle with routine. Routine was once our ally. It provided the framework for success and stability. But now, that same routine can feel like a psychological straitjacket. The predictability that once comforted us now feels like a guarantee of an uninteresting future. We crave novelty, but we fear instability. We want meaning, but we dread the difficult conversations required to find it. And so, many people choose the path of least resistance. They double down on the routine, hoping that if they just work harder, the feeling will dissipate. It rarely does. The psychological task is not to eliminate routine, but to inject genuine pockets of self-determined novelty and meaning into the existing structure. It is about honoring the stability we fought so hard to create, while simultaneously refusing to be suffocated by it. This requires courage, because redefining purpose often involves dismantling old beliefs about personal identity. If you defined yourself as the person who always achieved the next promotion, what happens when you realize the next promotion doesn't excite you at all? If you defined yourself entirely by your children's needs, what happens when they begin to naturally pull away? The loss of these early defining purposes can create a dizzying sense of void. This void is scary, but the fear is often misplaced. It is not the emptiness of failure, but the emptiness of the template finally being cleared, making room for something new to be written. The shift after 40 is often a pivot from ambition rooted in ego to ambition rooted in contribution. We move from asking, "How high can I climb?" to asking, "How deeply can I connect?" The desire for depth replaces the relentless hunger for breadth. This requires a different type of work. It is internal excavation. It means facing the truths about relationships that have been neglected, not maliciously, but through sheer distraction. It means confronting the reality that many friendships were circumstantial, based on location or shared past responsibilities, and that true, reciprocal connection takes deliberate effort. When we feel lost, the temptation is to look outward for a new direction, a new job, a new hobby, a new relationship. But the true clarity required at this stage is found by looking inward, at the core values that have been buried beneath layers of duty and expectation. We often mistake comfort for contentment. Comfort is the absence of immediate pain or material worry. Contentment is the quiet affirmation that our internal life aligns with our external commitments. Many people in midlife possess comfort in abundance, yet remain starved of genuine contentment. To address this, we must consciously divest ourselves of low-return activities. We must reclaim the hidden minutes and hours that are currently spent in passive consumption or maintaining relationships that offer no real sustenance. Time is the currency of midlife, and the stakes feel higher now because the total supply is clearer. The awareness of limits, of finite time and energy, is paradoxically the most liberating realization of this age. When we stop believing that time is infinite, we stop wasting it on things that do not nourish us. This stage demands a reevaluation of our relationship with work. For many years, work was the primary source of identity and meaning. It provided structure, economic security, and social affirmation. But as the emotional exhaustion sets in, work often becomes the central culprit. We realize that the effort required to excel far exceeds the personal reward. The political maneuvering, the necessary compromise, the endless cycle of demanding output, it all starts to feel heavy, transactional, and ultimately empty. The desire is not necessarily to retire, but to redefine work so that it feels less like a performance and more like a contribution. This doesn't always require a drastic career change. Sometimes, it requires subtle psychological shifts, setting firmer boundaries, refusing to internalize the outcomes, and decoupling self-worth from professional achievement. When we can separate our identity from our job title, the pressure begins to lift. We realize that the company will continue to function perfectly well without our total exhaustion. This realization is often a profound step toward emotional recovery. Acceptance is a crucial concept here, but it must be acceptance without resignation. Resignation is giving up the fight and settling for perpetual emptiness. Acceptance is acknowledging the reality of our current situation, the disappointments, the limitations, the unchangeable facts of our past, and using that clarity as the foundation for deliberate future action. It means accepting that the youthful dreams of effortless transformation were illusions, but also accepting that meaningful gradual change is entirely possible. The internal conflict often manifests in a feeling of being stuck. We feel paralyzed between the fear of staying the same and the fear of making a wrong move. This paralysis is rooted in the belief that we must find the single, perfect answer. But life, after 40, rarely offers single, perfect answers. It offers nuanced adjustments. It requires psychological flexibility, the willingness to experiment with small, incremental changes in behavior and attention. Instead of seeking one grand purpose, we might begin by seeking small pockets of genuine engagement throughout the week. A focused hobby, a deeper conversation, a few hours spent learning something completely new purely for the joy of it. These small acts of self-reclamation are the antidote to the functional numbness. They remind us that we are still capable of generating excitement, not just enduring responsibility. The mature psychological perspective understands that fulfillment is not a fixed destination, but a fluctuating state maintained through continuous conscious effort. It is not something that arrives automatically because we followed the rules. It is built, day by day, on the foundation of self-awareness. This awareness includes recognizing the patterns that lead to exhaustion. Many people in midlife are still operating on the psychological blueprint of their 20s, the belief that more effort equals more reward. We continue to say yes to obligations out of habit, or out of a residual need for approval that no longer serves us. The time for proving ourselves is over. The time for serving ourselves has begun. This is not selfish. It is self-preservation. If we continue to operate on empty, we eventually have nothing genuine left to offer anyone. The emotional exhaustion of midlife is often a signal fire. It is the deep internal system telling us that the operating parameters need immediate adjustment. It is a necessary friction that forces us to look away from external metrics and toward internal equilibrium. To move forward, we must begin by honoring the weight of the past commitments while refusing to be defined solely by them. We must grant ourselves permission to mourn the loss of the youthful excitement and the illusions of effortless happiness. And then, we must calmly begin the slow, deliberate work of reconstruction, building a life that honors the person we have become, not the person we thought we were supposed to be. But letting go of that blueprint, the one we followed so diligently, feels like releasing the safety net. It creates a deep, unsettling fear that if we stop doing what is right, everything will collapse. We confuse the structure of our life with the scaffolding of our identity. For decades, the measure of our worth has been tied to compliance, to checking the boxes labeled career, family, stability, and responsibility. To admit that the achievement of these things did not bring the promised equilibrium feels like a personal failure, a profound error in judgment that we are hesitant to voice. This internal conflict is the source of the deepest fatigue in midlife. It is not merely physical exhaustion from working long hours. It is the psychological strain of maintaining a successful facade over a soul that is quietly withdrawing its approval. We become weary of the performance. The energy required to hold up a life that fits an external ideal is immense, and eventually, the internal resources simply run dry. This depletion is the body's and mind's way of issuing a non-negotiable demand for change. It is the moment when the cost of pretense finally outweighs the perceived benefit of stability. When we hit this point, the silent frustrations begin to surface. They are rarely dramatic outbursts. They are slow, creeping disappointments felt during routine moments. Staring out the kitchen window while the coffee brews, driving the familiar route home, sitting alone after everyone else has gone to bed. We look at the evidence of our effort, the mortgage, the titles, the well-adjusted children, and the question surfaces not as a roar, but as a quiet whisper. Is this it? This question is misinterpreted by society as ingratitude or restlessness. But for the mature individual, it is a spiritual necessity. It is the soul, realizing that the goals it was chasing were proxies for something else entirely. We were chasing security, but we truly needed meaning. We were chasing approval, but we truly needed resonance. The psychological shift happening around age 40 or 50 involves a fundamental change in our reward system. For the young adult, external markers provide a significant dopamine hit. A promotion, a new relationship, a purchased object. These generate excitement and validation. In midlife, those same markers begin to yield diminishing returns. The applause fades faster. The new car is just a means of transport. The successful negotiation is just another item checked off the list. The mind no longer finds satisfaction in mere acquisition or upward mobility. It begins to crave depth, connection, and congruence. It is looking for things that settle rather than things that excite. This is a subtle but profound movement away from the metrics of the world and toward the metrics of the self. This shift often brings with it an uncomfortable period of emotional reckoning. We must face the silent disappointment that success itself did not deliver the lasting peace we were promised. We must accept that the contract we implicitly signed with life in our 20s, the one that promised happiness in exchange for diligence, was based on incomplete information. The disappointment is not with our achievements. It is with the nature of achievement itself. This is where many people get stuck, caught in a psychological no man's land. They are too successful to complain, yet too miserable to enjoy the success. They feel trapped by the very structures they labored so hard to build. To navigate this successfully, we must stop viewing this feeling of emptiness as a failure of character and start seeing it as a necessary signal for restructuring. The emptiness is not an absence of things, it is an absence of fit. The container we built no longer holds the water we need to drink. We must grant ourselves permission to mourn the loss of the youthful illusion that effort equals guaranteed emotional fulfillment. That illusion was powerful, and letting it go is difficult because it requires us to surrender certainty. The next phase of life demands acceptance, but not resignation. There is a crucial difference here. Resignation is giving up. It is the passive surrender to routine, deciding that the future will look exactly like the present, only more faded. It is stopping the search for meaning entirely. Acceptance, however, is an active process of realism. It is accepting the reality of our current limits, our true emotional needs, and the passage of time in order to redirect our remaining energy toward sustainable purpose. Acceptance says, I cannot fight gravity, but I can learn to build something strong on the ground. This involves a serious inventory of our commitments. Many of the commitments we carry past 40 are inertia, not choice. They are activities, relationships, or duties that began with purpose, but now only continue because stopping them seems too difficult or too rude. The mature task is to calmly identify these inertial commitments and determine which ones are truly necessary for the well-being of others, and which ones are merely serving to uphold an old, unnecessary image of ourselves. We often fear that simplifying our lives means becoming less important, or perhaps even boring. But the people who achieve genuine clarity in midlife understand that depth is far more compelling than superficial breadth. They trade the frantic need to be everywhere and do everything for the focused intensity of being present where they choose to be. This is the psychological trade-off that defines maturity. Trading the thrill of potential for the grounding of reality. When we were younger, potential was exciting. The world was full of possibilities that were all equally open. Now, we face the necessary closing down of some doors, not as a tragedy, but as a clarification. By closing the doors that were never truly aligned with our core self, we allow more light and air into the few rooms that truly matter. This process of winnowing and focusing is often misunderstood by those still in the younger stage of life, who see the quiet life as a lesser life. but the mature individual knows that the quiet life is the one where genuine thought can occur, where true connection can be fostered, and where the self can finally be heard above the noise of expectation. The key to reconstruction lies in prioritizing what we call psychological safety. Psychological safety is the feeling that we can be our authentic selves, with all our flaws and uncertainties, without fear of catastrophic loss of love, loss of status, or loss of stability. When we spent our youth chasing external metrics, we inherently created psychological risk, because we always had to hide the parts of ourselves that didn't fit the success narrative. Now, we need to build environments, both internal and external, where we are safe enough to stop hiding. This often means recalibrating our most intimate relationships. Many partnerships built in the 20s were alliances based on shared forward momentum, climbing the career ladder, raising children, achieving financial goals. These are functional alliances, but they are not always emotionally resonant. Partnerships. As the forward momentum slows, the space between partners expands, and often, the individuals look across that space and realize they are strangers, defined only by shared logistical duties. The difficult work here is the quiet, honest conversation about who we have become, separate from the roles we play. It requires vulnerability, which is terrifying after decades spent perfecting emotional control. But ignoring this requirement guarantees emotional stagnation. To move from an alliance of function to a partnership of resonance requires both people to acknowledge that the old definition of us is insufficient, and that the marriage itself must evolve, or it will eventually ossify. This is a risk, but it is a necessary one, because emotional starvation inside a functional structure is the most painful form of midlife trap. We are seeking congruence. Congruence is the state where what we feel internally matches what we express externally. For decades, we lived in a state of professional and social incongruence, saying yes when we meant no, smiling when we felt tired, and pursuing goals that didn't genuinely resonate with our deep needs. Reaching congruence is not an aggressive act. It is a gradual softening. It starts with small refusals. Refusing the invitation that drains you. Refusing the obligation that serves only vanity. Refusing the conversation that only requires a shallow performance. Each small refusal is a reclaiming of energy and an affirmation of the mature self's boundaries. It is a slow, methodical process of clearing the emotional debt we accumulated by trying to please everyone and fit everywhere. This path requires courage, not the flashy courage of youth that seeks victory, but the quiet, enduring courage of maturity that seeks truth. It is the courage to sit with the ambiguity of the present moment, recognizing that reconstruction takes time, and that the feeling of being lost is often just the feeling of being between maps. The old map is clearly wrong, but the new terrain has not yet been fully charted. We are navigating by internal compass now, and that demands patience with the lack of immediate clear direction. We must learn to accept that the feeling of being lost is frequently the sign that we are finally moving beyond the prescribed path. It is the necessary disorientation that precedes genuine redirection. To feel lost simply means we have ceased following external signals and have started listening for our own internal frequency. The process of building a life that honors the person we have become requires us to engage with the reality of time. We must accept that our capacity for endless activity is diminished, but our capacity for deep, meaningful contribution is enhanced. We are trading sheer quantity of output for quality of presence. This means realizing that our value is no longer derived from our productivity, but from our perspective, from the wisdom and calm authority we have accumulated through decades of experience. This shift changes our relationship with work itself. If we defined ourselves by our title for the first 20 years, the next 20 must be defined by our impact, regardless of the title. For those facing the plateau, or even the decline in professional status, this acceptance is especially critical. The initial impulse is to fight the inevitability of the professional arc, to prove we are still capable of the same youthful hustle. This fight is often futile and deeply draining. The mature perspective is to look at the work not as a means of personal advancement, but as a vehicle for transferring knowledge, mentoring, or creating something of genuine, lasting value that transcends the immediate financial reward. It is a subtle shift from being the star player to being the steady anchor. This is not settling. It is prioritizing legacy over immediate gain. And finally, we must address the internal dialogue about purpose. The feeling of emptiness often stems from a lack of felt purpose, even if, logically, we are still fulfilling many roles. Purpose in midlife is rarely found in a grand external mission. It is typically found in the small, consistent acts of contribution and connection that ground us in reality. It might be maintaining a skill, caring for a small piece of land, fostering specific relationships, or engaging deeply with a subject that genuinely fascinates us. It is found not in seeking the spotlight, but in tending the small, warm flame inside the house. This quiet purpose, built on authenticity and realistic limitations, is the antidote to the emptiness. It offers clarity without illusion, demanding only that we show up, truthfully, for the life we actually have, rather than the one we were taught to pursue. It is the slow, deliberate work of becoming whole. We often mistake this deep exhaustion for simple physical fatigue, but it runs far deeper than a need for better sleep or a change of diet. It is the steady, unseen drain of energy spent maintaining a self that is not quite authentic, or upholding structures that no longer fit who we have become. When we reach the middle chapters of our story, we are carrying the heavy cloak of all the expectations we met, and all the silent sacrifices we made to keep up appearances. This cloak feels familiar, even warm, because it defines us to the world. But it is also stifling. It restricts the movement of the soul. The real work of becoming whole starts not when we achieve a new goal, but when we finally admit how fundamentally weary we are. This weariness is not born of exertion, but of conformity. The person we were trained to be, the highly ambitious, endlessly striving, externally validated self, demands resources that the current, more grounded self cannot afford to give. We find ourselves in a profound psychological conflict. The successful, efficient self of the past fights hard to remain in control, terrified that if it lets go of the reins, nothing substantial will be left behind. This is the hidden crisis of midlife. It is rarely the dramatic external collapse portrayed in fiction. Instead, it is the terrifying internal realization that the central character of our life story might need to be recast entirely. We cling desperately to titles and roles: the perfect parent, the reliable high achiever, the person who always knows the answer, because they offer crucial psychological protection against the perceived void. To allow that old identity to dissolve requires tremendous courage. It means standing nakedly in the truth of who we are right now, stripped of the external markers that used to prove our worth. This fear of the void is why so many people, having done everything right, retreat into rigid routine. They tighten the bolts on the life they built, hoping that sheer discipline will force fulfillment back into the container. But life is fluid. When a container becomes too rigid, it doesn't hold the essence of life, it only holds dust. The disappointment many feel is not just disappointment with life's outcomes, but disappointment with the very formula they followed. It was supposed to work. The map promised treasure, and now we stand at the X, finding only cracked earth. The mature response to this realization involves distinguishing between acceptance and resignation. These two states look similar on the surface, but they are dramatically different psychologically. Resignation is passive. It is the bitterness of giving up hope and settling into mediocrity, accompanied by the low-grade hum of self-pity. It pulls energy away from the present moment. It means shrinking the scope of life because the pain of past failure feels too great to risk trying again. Acceptance, conversely, is an active psychological stance. It is the clarity of seeing the limits of our influence and the truth of our current situation without judgment or illusion. It means looking at the career plateau, the imperfect relationship, or the permanent absence of certain cherished dreams, and saying, simply, "This is the ground I stand on." Acceptance is not about loving the disappointment. It is about acknowledging reality so that we can finally focus the remaining years on what is still possible, rather than mourning what never was. It frees up the immense energy we spent fighting against what already happened. When we stop fighting the past, we gain the presence necessary to shape the future. Midlife requires us to fundamentally redefine success. For the first half, success was defined by accumulation, acquisition, and ascent. We were climbing a visible ladder. In the second half, true success pivots toward subtraction, refinement, and depth. It becomes an inward journey. We are no longer asking, "How high can I climb?" We are asking, "How deep can I go into my own experience? How honest can I be with those I love? How much unnecessary weight can I shed?" The weight we need to shed is often psychological baggage disguised as responsibility. We carry old grudges, unsaid apologies, and the heavy burden of trying to control outcomes that are fundamentally uncontrollable. Learning to drop these burdens is one of the most practical applications of psychology in later life. It is the realization that many of the psychological struggles we face are not caused by external events, but by our internal resistance to those events. Consider the conflict of feeling stalled in a routine. We feel trapped by the repetition of our days, the same commute, the same desk, the same dinner routine. This feeling of being trapped often masks a deeper fear. The fear that we have lost the capacity for novelty, for surprise, for spontaneous joy. The structure of routine itself is not the problem. Highly creative and purposeful people often rely on deep routine to free up mental space. The trap occurs when the routine is entered into without conscious intent, when we are simply reacting to the demands of the schedule rather than shaping it. To revitalize a routine requires small, conscious acts of rebellion against stagnation. Not huge, disruptive changes, but deliberate shifts in perspective. It might be dedicating 10 minutes every morning not to planning the day, but simply to reflecting on what genuinely interests you right now, outside of your duties. It is about finding small cracks in the structure of obligation where genuine curiosity can slip in. This shift from obligation to curiosity is essential after 40. For decades, duty was the primary engine. Duty drove us through school, through career advancements, and through the intense demands of early parenting. It is a powerful engine, but it runs on obligation, which is ultimately depleting. Curiosity, on the other hand, runs on internal fuel. It is self-sustaining. It doesn't ask what you should do, but what you are drawn to. Many mature adults struggle to identify their genuine curiosity because they learned early on to suppress it in favor of practicality. We need to relearn how to play, not in the sense of organized fun, but in the sense of genuine, open-ended exploration that has no required outcome. This is where the quiet purpose emerges, in the intersection between our refined skills and our reactivated curiosity. It is often hidden in the things we used to do instinctively before the weight of adulthood crushed them. It might be found in the slow, satisfying work of restoring something old, or mastering a small, complex skill, or simply observing the natural world with focused attention. These activities remind us that our internal life is still vast, even if our external life seems contained. The emptiness we feel after doing everything right is often the vacuum left by the collapse of external validation as a primary fuel source. We reach the peak of the mountain we were told to climb, look around, and realize the view is meaningless if we climbed it only to impress others. Now, the true lasting validation must come from the consistency between our internal values and our daily actions. This is integrity. Integrity in midlife is not just about telling the truth to others. It is about finally telling the truth to ourselves about our own limits, our needs, and our quiet desires. It means accepting that we cannot be everything to everyone. We must prioritize energy ruthlessly, protecting our attention as if it were a precious finite resource, because it is. The mature psychological task is to stop spending energy where it yields no return, on chasing approval, on unnecessary arguments, or on trying to fulfill the expectations of people who stopped mattering years ago. This shedding of external obligations often feels selfish at first. We are conditioned to believe that prioritizing our internal needs is a moral failing. But in reality, establishing clear boundaries and protecting one's energy is the necessary foundation for sustained giving. You cannot pour from an empty vessel, and after 40 years of service, the vessel needs dedicated refilling. The deeper disappointment that people rarely voice is realizing that certain fundamental relationship needs may never be met by the specific people we chose or were given. We carry the hope that our partner, our sibling, or our child will finally see us in the way we long to be seen, or fulfill a need for emotional intimacy that has been historically absent. When we reach midlife, the patterns are usually set. The mature acceptance here is difficult, but profoundly liberating. It is accepting the limitations of others, not as a judgment of their character, but as a simple fact of their psychological structure. We must stop demanding apples from an orange tree. The orange tree is beautiful and provides excellent oranges, but it will never yield the apple we desperately desire. Accepting this limitation shifts the burden. We stop trying to change the other person and instead focus on where we can realistically source that particular emotional need, perhaps through deeper friendships, community involvement, or through self-compassion. This move is not resignation, it is self-parenting. It is taking responsibility for our own needs rather than placing the heavy, often impossible expectation of fulfillment onto someone else. The pursuit of purpose in midlife often requires simplifying the idea of legacy. For many years, we were obsessed with leaving a grand footprint, an undeniable mark on the world. But the emptiness fades when we realize that the most profound legacy is often found in the quiet ripple effects of our daily character. It is in the quality of attention we give during a conversation. It is in the patience shown during stress. It is in the small acts of mentorship or kindness that change the trajectory of one other person's day. This is a subtle shift from focusing on what we produced to focusing on how we lived. The mature perspective acknowledges that life is fundamentally defined by small moments strung together, not by a few large dramatic achievements. We spend 99% of our time in the mundane. The question, then, is how present and truthful were we during that 99%? The feeling of being lost, even after doing everything right, is often the soul's desperate attempt to reorient itself toward truth. It is a psychological compass spinning wildly because the magnetic north it was pointing toward, external approval and societal definition, has disappeared. We must install a new compass, one calibrated to internal alignment. This new clarity requires stillness. We have spent decades conditioned to be busy. Silence feels dangerous because it gives the internal critic a voice, and it forces us to confront the feelings we have expertly managed to outrun through constant activity. The practice of psychological maturity involves deliberately creating space where the unconscious can surface. It is the practice of sitting still, with the discomfort of realizing that the goals that drove us at 30 no longer hold any meaning at 50. This stillness allows us to observe the disappointment without being overwhelmed by it. We learn that disappointment is simply information. It is data showing us where our expectations clashed with reality. It is not a moral failure, it is a necessary update to our operating system. And finally, we find the core strength required to navigate the second half of life, not in forced positivity or relentless striving, but in a profound, deep realism. Clarity without illusion is the ultimate peace, It means accepting that life will always contain pain and loss. It means acknowledging our own flaws and limitations. It means seeing the world as it is, complex, imperfect, often unfair, and choosing to engage with it anyway, fully, with open eyes. This mature realism is the foundation of genuine contentment. It is the realization that joy does not depend on the absence of problems, but on the presence of meaning, however small and quiet that meaning may be. The work continues, not to earn external approval, but simply to inhabit our own lives truthfully until the end. But truthfulness is not a passive state. It requires a difficult kind of internal surrender. We have spent decades building an identity, often unconsciously, around the belief that if we follow the rules, the reward, lasting peace, permanent fulfillment, will appear. When it doesn't, the instinct is not to question the script, but to double down on the performance. We look at the emptiness and assume we just need a bigger title, a better relationship, or a more demanding routine. We mistake the internal silence for a lack of activity. Midlife exhaustion, that profound drain many of us feel, is often the soul running out of fuel for an unsustainable performance. The conflict becomes deeply internal. The ego demands the next milestone, the visible proof of success, while the deeper self craves stillness and honesty. This is the moment we start fighting the ghost of our own former ambition. It is a difficult thing to watch the younger, striving self fade, because that self was always driven by hope and the promise of a future payoff. The mature self recognizes that the payoff is now. The reward is simply the quality of the experience we are having in this moment. The shift we must make is from the measurable to the intangible. We stop asking, "Did I achieve X?" and start asking, "Did I act with integrity in pursuit of X?" The metric changes entirely. We are no longer measuring the size of the house, but the quiet strength of the foundation beneath us. This requires recalibrating our sense of purpose. For so long, purpose was tied to production, to output, to visibility. Now purpose begins to reside in preservation and connection. Preservation of our energy, preservation of our peace, and connection to the few people and activities that genuinely matter. Identity after 40 becomes less about the titles we hold and more about the quality of presence we bring to our day. We begin to understand that the role, the parent, the professional, the partner, is temporary. What remains is the quiet internal quality of the person inhabiting that role. This is why small, forgotten acts of kindness or quiet competence often start holding more weight than grand public achievements. They feel more real. They are closer to the truth of who we are when the audience leaves. This is also where we confront the disappointment we hold toward others. When we realize the script was flawed, we often blame the people who helped write it. Parents, mentors, partners who encouraged us down a specific path. We feel betrayed by the institutions we served, and by the promises society made about hard work and reward. Holding on to this disappointment, however understandable, acts like a constant low-level drain. It keeps us anchored in the past, demanding a retroactive apology or justification that will never fully arrive. The work of mature psychology involves releasing others from the obligation to make sense of our disappointment. Their choices were their own, often based on their own fear and limitation. Our job now is to take back the energy we spend expecting them to change, or to admit they were wrong. This is where the distinction between acceptance and resignation becomes vital. Many people fear acceptance because they confuse it with passive surrender. They think accepting the reality of an imperfect career, a strained relationship, or unrealized potential means giving up hope. Resignation is indeed a weary giving up. It is the feeling that nothing matters and effort is useless. Acceptance, however, is an active alignment with reality. It is the clarity to see what cannot be changed, and therefore redirecting all that wasted energy toward what can be nurtured. toward the parts of life that still respond to our careful attention. When we stop fighting the ghosts of what should have been, we suddenly gain access to a tremendous reserve of psychological fuel. We stop arguing with reality, and reality stops arguing back. This maturity grants us a significant, often overlooked power: the ability to choose our battles wisely. We stop trying to fix everything that is broken in the world, or in ourselves, and instead commit to tending the small, viable garden of our own immediate lives. This shift means finding peace in the mundane repetition of routine. For the striving self, routine was the enemy. It was the sign that life had stopped moving forward. For the mature, self-seeking meaning, routine becomes the structure that holds life together. It is the rhythm that allows for subtle growth. We learn to find the meaning hidden within the necessary tasks: the careful preparation of a meal, the focused completion of a simple task at work, the quiet consistency of exercise. These actions stop being tedious obligations and become opportunities to practice presence. They become chances to inhabit our own skin fully, without distraction or yearning for something bigger. The psychological quiet that follows this realization is often mistaken for depression or apathy at first, especially by those still operating in the noise of external ambition. But it is not apathy. It is simply the sound of the internal engine slowing down from a frantic sprint to a sustainable cruise. We stop chasing the high of novelty and start valuing the low hum of reliability. We learn that stability is not boring. It is the prerequisite for depth. Without stability, all our energy is spent managing chaos and reacting to fear. With stability, we can finally afford to look inward and cultivate the inner landscape that we neglected for decades while we were busy achieving. This cultivation involves facing the silent disappointments that reside not in the big milestones, but in the texture of daily life. The relationships that settled into comfortable, yet distant patterns. The talents that were left undeveloped because they didn't offer a reliable income. The personal boundaries that were compromised so many times they simply dissolved. Healing the feeling of emptiness often means rebuilding these internal boundaries, deciding what we will and will not permit in our lives going forward, not to please others, but to protect our own fragile peace. This is an act of self-respect that is often terrifying, because it risks confrontation and potential loss. But the fear of loss must be balanced against the cost of keeping things that constantly diminish us. When we reach midlife, we realize our time is finite in a way that felt abstract when we were young. This knowledge is not meant to inspire a frantic, final burst of achievement. Instead, it serves as a profound editing tool. It forces us to ask, if this is the remaining time I have, who and what deserves access to my limited energy? The people who are genuinely interested in the real you, the flawed, complex, searching person, will remain. The relationships built on performance or expectation will naturally fade, and that fading must be seen not as failure, but as natural attrition. It is necessary clearing for the things that truly nourish the soul. This clearing process is essential for overcoming the specific midlife despair of feeling lost after doing everything right. We were lost because we were following someone else's map. The only way to find ourselves is to admit that the entire structure we built might be sound and functional, but fundamentally in the wrong location. We must accept the monumental task of redrawing our own map, not based on where we think we should go, but based on where our deepest, quietest self feels pulled. This map won't look impressive to the outside world. It might prioritize silence over status, simple work over high stress, and genuine connection over broad networking. This is the point where we begin to understand that the feeling of emptiness was not a punishment, but a necessary signal. It was the internal alarm bell indicating that the vessel was traveling fast, but in the wrong direction. The emptiness was the lack of resonance between the outer life and the inner self. The path forward is not about filling the void with new achievements, but about closing the gap between who we present ourselves to be and who we fundamentally are. When the two align, even modestly, the feeling of emptiness recedes, replaced by a sense of quiet coherence. We become simply ourselves, finally and fully inhabiting the life we already have. But finding this coherence, this simple alignment, is not easy. It requires undoing decades of conditioning. We spent the first half of life building a structure designed to impress the world, or at least designed to keep up with the world's expectations. Now, standing inside that structure, we realize it doesn't quite fit the shape of our soul. This realization often brings profound, silent frustration. It's the disappointment we cannot voice because, externally, everything appears successful. How do you tell someone, or even yourself, that the life you fought so hard to create feels like a beautiful, well-maintained museum that you are merely visiting, not inhabiting? This is where the psychological demands of midlife become intense. The world tells us that if something is lacking, we must simply acquire more of the external good. More money, a better title, a new experience. But after 40, many realize that the architecture of their satisfaction needs to be rebuilt from the inside out. After 40, the energetic fuel that drove ambition in our 20s and 30s begins to thin out. We are no longer motivated by the sheer novelty of new things or the relentless hunger of proving ourselves. That early energy was outward-focused, fueled by anticipation and the belief in infinite potential. Now, the body and mind demand a different kind of investment. We trade intensity for sustainability. We trade breadth for depth. This shift often registers initially as generalized tiredness or even persistent mild depression. But it is actually the psyche calling for a reallocation of resources. If we continue to spend energy trying to maintain the pace and the image of our younger self, we quickly become emotionally bankrupt. The exhaustion sets in not because we are doing too much, but because we are doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. We are still chasing goals set by a person we no longer are. The quiet revolution of midlife is the realization that the primary goal is no longer acquisition, but selection. It is about actively choosing what gets to consume our finite energy. This requires a level of ruthlessness that can feel unkind at first, especially regarding relationships or commitments that are draining but familiar. We have to face the things we do purely out of habit, or out of a sense of obligation inherited from our past. These ghosts of old commitments are heavy. They hold us down. To close the gap between the external life and the inner self, we must begin to subtract. We must create spaciousness. This subtraction is not a luxury. It is a necessary act of psychological survival. It is the only way to hear the quieter, deeper voice that knows what meaning actually looks like for us now. For many, this process forces a confrontation with the fundamental elements of routine. Routine is usually seen as the enemy of excitement, the source of boredom. But at this stage, routine is the scaffolding for peace. If your life is built around chaos and reaction, the void of meaning will feel immense and frightening. But a life built on intentional small routines offers grounding. We learn that the true quality of life resides in the intentionality of the small things. How we prepare our morning coffee, how we manage the first 30 minutes of the workday, how we listen to a partner or a friend. These moments, previously dismissed as background noise, become the foreground of significance. This transition demands a careful negotiation with the concept of acceptance. Many people confuse acceptance with resignation. This distinction is vital for anyone seeking clarity after 4 decades of striving. Resignation is a passive surrender. It says, "This is all there is, and I hate it, so I will stop trying." It leads to bitterness, apathy, and a retreat into cynicism. It is the death of possibility. Acceptance is active. It requires presence and honesty. It says, "This is reality right now. These are the fixed constraints of this moment. My health, my responsibilities, my history, my financial limits. Now, within these constraints, how do I create something true, valuable, and worthwhile? Acceptance is not giving up the future. It is giving up the fantasy of a perfect, frictionless future that was never going to materialize anyway. It is embracing the limitations that define our unique shape. It is acknowledging that the person who did everything right for 40 years is also the person who is here now, with all their specific baggage and unexpected wisdom. When we accept the present structure of our lives, we stop wasting energy mourning the paths we didn't take. That energy is then freed up to invest in the path we are actually on. This shift is profoundly empowering, even though it feels quiet and undramatic. Psychologically, this is the move from the external measure of success, the trophy cabinet, to the internal measure of integrity, the quiet coherence of living in alignment with one's own discovered values. Clarity, at this stage of life, is the final shedding of illusion. We stop believing in sudden, dramatic rescues. We stop waiting for the cosmic intervention that will magically rewrite our past or erase our present obligations. The idea that one single massive change, a relocation, a new partner, a windfall, will fix the internal hollowness dissolves. We understand that true substance is accumulated slowly. It is built in the daily, often boring, discipline of showing up for the life we have. The great work of midlife is learning to treat the boring parts with respect, because the boring parts are where most of our life is actually lived. This movement away from illusion also means confronting the narratives we inherited about identity and work. For decades, our identity was often interwoven with our professional output or our role within the family structure. When the children leave, or the career plateaus, or the job changes, the central pillar of identity shakes. This is destabilizing, but it is also an opportunity. It is an opportunity to discover the self that exists beneath the roles, the self that remains when the titles are stripped away. This self is often older, quieter, and less ambitious in the traditional sense, but infinitely more robust. It is the self that cares more about influence than fame, more about quality than quantity, and more about peace than excitement. The frustration and exhaustion we feel often stem from trying to force this discovered, quieter self back into the loud, competitive suit of the younger self. We are trying to run a marathon with the energy system designed for quiet gardening. The answer, then, is not to find a new, bigger marathon to run, but to redefine what constitutes a meaningful daily walk. It is about understanding that the pursuit of meaning is not a grand quest to a far-off land, but the deep, sustained attention given to the ground right beneath our feet. This deep attention requires a subtle but profound surrender. Not a surrender of effort, but a surrender of the fantasy, of how life was supposed to look at this age. This is often where people hesitate. They confuse acceptance with resignation. They worry that if they stop fighting the current reality, they are simply giving up on ambition, on vitality, on life itself. But true acceptance is the most active psychological choice you can make. It is the decision to stop spending half your vital energy fighting the facts of your life, the facts of your body, your history, your limitations, and the irreversible passage of time. When we accept the frame we are currently within, we stop seeing the world through the lens of what is missing. We stop projecting the imagined perfect future onto the imperfect present. We release the heavy psychological burden of pretending things are different than they are. This release is not passive. It is a redirecting of energy. All the power that was used to resist reality is now available to build something meaningful within reality. The key distinction here is between settling and grounding. Settling implies a defeat, a lowering of standards because you are too tired to fight. Grounding implies a foundational decision, an anchoring into what is real and sustainable, driven by clarity, not exhaustion. Midlife requires us to choose grounding. We need to define success not by the vertical distance we climb, but by the horizontal stability we achieve. We recognize that the chase for that intense, external excitement, the kind that fueled our 20s and 30s, is often just an avoidance strategy. It is a way to generate noise so we do not have to listen to the quiet disappointment within. As we mature, that noise becomes unbearable. Clarity at this stage means fully seeing the limits of your agency. We spent decades believing that enough effort could conquer anything. We now realize that much of life is governed by forces outside our control: luck, biology, the choices of others, the sheer scale of the world. This realization can bring a quiet sadness. It is the necessary melancholy of maturity. We grieve the impossible version of ourselves we once hoped to become. But within that sadness, there is enormous relief. The pressure to be superhuman finally lifts. You stop chasing the high-wattage excitement that always fades quickly, and you start focusing on the things that generate lasting warmth. These are not loud, glamorous achievements. They are the quality of your relationships, the integrity of your daily work, the simple, focused rituals that ground you. They are things that compound slowly over years, not things that explode into public view for a moment of applause. When you shift from seeking excitement to seeking meaning, you find that meaning is often hidden in repetition. The daily, unglamorous tasks, the careful preparation of food, the attentive listening to a spouse, the honest labor of maintaining a skill, these are the things that build a life of substance. This resolution of internal conflict also requires a radical honesty about purpose. We spent so long defining purpose externally, usually tied to our career or our financial climb. That purpose often felt mandatory, not chosen. Now, purpose shifts inward. It becomes defined by your quality of attention. If you can bring sustained, non-judgmental attention to a task, a conversation, or a single afternoon, that attention itself becomes the purpose. You are moving from asking, "What massive thing should I build?" to asking, "How richly can I inhabit this moment?" The deepest shift that resolves this midlife emptiness is the shift in identity metrics. For so long, we measured our worth by accumulation, of money, of status, of impressive stories. We were nouns: the executive, the parent, the achiever. Now, the internal self demands a different measure. It demands that we define ourselves by verbs, by how we listen, how we repair, how we maintain, how we simply exist without pretense. This quiet identity is durable. It cannot be taken away by a market crash, a job loss, or the visible effects of aging. It resides solely in your character and your daily commitment to being fully present in the life you actually have. When we finally allow ourselves to step off the track of continuous striving, we realize that the feeling of emptiness was not a sign that we needed to acquire more, but a sign that we needed to shed everything unnecessary. The exhaustion was the cost of carrying an identity that no longer fit. The task of life after 40, then, is often subtraction. It is editing down the commitments, the expectations, the relationships and the possessions that drain us without offering real nourishment. It is simplifying the operating system of the self. We move from trying to fill the void to trying to accept the space. We recognize that true freedom is not having limitless options, but having clear boundaries. This quiet conclusion of the journey is not a burst of manufactured happiness. It is a deep, sustaining sense of integrity. The sense of being lost fades when you realize you were never meant to find a far-off destination, but simply to inhabit the road itself, with open eyes and a steady pace, appreciating the ground right beneath your feet. You discover that having done everything right was just preparation. The real work begins now, in learning how to be truly human, and simply, profoundly present.